Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. I'm just gonna put the this on for a second while I put some images up for the mainstream. Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome to the stream. And, well, hopefully it's been a great New Year's for you. I don't know what time it is where you are, but it must be early in the morning or very, very, you know. Oh, I can hear myself. Not good. Hang on. Sorry about that. We'll have to mute that. Not a good start. Let me just fix this. I don't know what time it is where you are, but it must be early in the morning or very, very silly thing. Sorry about that. Let me just mute that. For some reason, it seems to have stopped anyway. Crashed. Website crashed. All right, that's all right. Hopefully the chats actually come through when we do this. So, Happy New Year, everyone. I do have a chat thing here, so maybe you can say something in the chat so I can see that it's actually working there and stream's working. But I might as well just get straight on with it. And hopefully the chats will come through. But yeah, wishing you a Happy New Year's, everyone. What I wanted to talk about today is the golden age of Trump and Elon, based on what he's recently said. But deeper underneath, also looking at Sam Hyde's conversation, his posting of his video. Because there is something deep in there that isn't just about material conditions, but is something to do with the spirit that is actually being ignored. Maybe something deep down within the American and even with the international MAGA person or the international groyper or the international person on the resistance that sees that that there's something missing. It sees that the vision that's being created for the United States notices that is only skin deep. That even if all the material conditions returned, that it would still be a kind of hellscape that liberalism has foisted upon all of us. Because that's all they can offer, because they both are materialists, both Elon and Trump. And so I think people know that. There's something deep in the response to Elon's comments about immigration that is about, within the people, about not wishing to be treated like a number, to knowing there's something more of deeper substance to them that is being exploited and has been for the last, 50 years or longer. But not just kin group, not just in group or kin group, but what of that? There's something deeper down in that group of Americans, let's say, of European Americans, that it's like a sibling. It's like knowing there's a potentiality of a sibling of yours and they're not living up to their potentiality. What is that deep down? Is it because of exploitation, because of corruption, because of racism against white people in the country? There's something deep down within them that knows there's a deep potentiality that is being completely destroyed and pasted over. It's a condition of the soul, right? And what is potentiality? It's the future of what could be of that people. And what could be of that people is their folk angel, you could call it. Yes, peoples have folk angels, angels that are assigned to them. They present a future through divine will that people move towards. They send ideas, but not ideas in the normal sense, not ideas in the sense that Elon Musk understands ideas, which are just the dead propositions that enter the naive view of physical, factical world, but ideals, meaning they come connected in the pure form of knowledge, which contains both will and feeling, a true living being or idea. That's what drove Americans to the United States to begin with. And he still lives. The angel still lives and has a future. And so there is this deeply hidden potentiality that is almost lost, or there's a sense that it's almost lost. So it's not just about material conditions. It's this potentiality that this people had and have seen before it became full-on materialist, because it was a very spiritual country to begin with. But this potentiality that they had that has been pasted and covered over by the material concerns. And so that's what we're going to get into. And we're going to react off Sam Hyde's video. Not so much to talk about his comments, but really just of the ideas there about Musk. Is Musk a great man? By what measures? And what measures are missing when talking about that? So I might just, I'm going to bring up a video here rather than just keep talking. Maybe there's some people have been talking. Yeah, maybe not. Let me have a look. Let's jump over to... I might just keep going then, because I'm not seeing any chats come through. Happy New Year, everyone! If you're there, maybe I'll just quickly check on Twitter to see if anyone said anything yet. People retweeting. Okay, that's good. But I want to see if anyone said anything on the. Sorry, this stuff doesn't work very well yet. It's a new app, but hopefully that introduction was good. So let's refresh the chat to see if anyone said anything. But maybe we'll jump over the screen cap and have a look at this Japanese, apparently the world's biggest firework, which I thought was pretty impressive, materially impressive. What we need is a spiritual one of these. In the beginning, there's the Kiev strikes again. Yeah, certainly. Happy New Year. There's some chats coming through. I wonder if they're new. I don't know. But anyway, I'm just watching this. I just thought that was quite striking, that firework from Japan. Because what we need is that in the spirit, as Dugan calls the radical subject, which we'll look into today. This isn't going to be sort of like the other streams. We're going to do the best we can here because we're sort of reacting off the news and the like and speaking about it. And hopefully you guys can interact and it be more of a conversation with what's going on. So, yes, on that point of the American people and that reaction to that, and how that relates to what is this new year going to be? What is this golden age going to be? Or what are we going to do? What is a true vision? Can we do something else that can actually be not just better material conditions? Because people have promised better material conditions for the past 100 years in the United States and in Western countries. We need another promise, a promise that will require sacrifice, a building, something like what Putin did with the cathedral to the armed forces. And with that, really when you think about it, it's like 1/7 of our time should be to worship and the Sabbath. In a way, 1/7 of our income should be to sacred space, to establishing it, another beginning. Because how do you actually have a vision unless you can break out of the thought regime? And this even comes to Elon Musk too, is that when you think about, as he talks about, if we consider, is he a great man? And we will jump over to Sam Hyde's video in a second, but I'm just on a roll here. He talks about first principles thinking. But really when he talks about it, he talks about the conditions of subjects that have already been disclosed, rocket science, this and the like. It's always about the basic assumptions of something that's already presented and disclosed within a scientism worldview. The true first principles thinking is a ontological thinking. It's a breaking down that very worldview that would see whether it's even worth going to Mars at all, if that's even a worthy goal. It's actually not a first principles thinking, for one thing. It's something he always talks about. Heidegger talks about true first principles thinking, which is a ontology. It's asking the question of being itself. What is what is? Getting underneath to the first principles, which end up being almost beings that make the world presence the way it does. That's how you decide a new vision. Otherwise, you end up being provoked by the spirit of the times into whatever arbitrary goal you end up choosing. And so, yeah, let's jump over to what Sam has to say in his video, and then we'll just we'll roll and react off that and see how we go. But mainly, coming on to wish you all a happy New Year's and seeing how we can do this as a new format, rather than this isn't the normal lecture. So I'm just going to jump over to it now. So here it is. Okay.
I swear to God, Vivek would have figured this out by now. I want to believe that Elon is one of the great men of our age and that he has what it takes to become a 21st century Andrew Carnegie. I think it's important to have great men to look up to. Trump, Joe Rogan. Oh, there it goes.
So, yes, we're going to be pausing it a fair few times throughout this. And we might not get through all of it. But is he a great man? Okay. By what vectors? Yes, he's a great man in the sense of power. He has a lot of power and capital. He's a great man in the sense that material, technological, it's yet to be seen how good the electric car actually is in terms of if that's going to really save anything, for one. But in terms of a material achievement, yes. But then you assess, okay, and it's not like I could do any of that. I'm not suggesting I could or anything like that. He is the richest man in the world. So by that vector, yes. Was Carnegie even a great man? Because they even Carnegie even turned to philanthropy at the end. Because when you look at a great man, you need to look at were they providing a service? Did what they did unlock some sort of innovation that was a service to mankind? Only if you say Mars, only if you, from within that frame, think that an asteroid could actually hit this planet and destroy it. From the Christian worldview, and from a worldview that's not materialist, that's absurd that would happen. Yes, we know asteroids hit the planet. It's happened before. But if in a place where there's a God, that's just not something, the multiplanetary species thing isn't a concern. I mean, from our perspective, really, the Platonistic thing is true, is that all the, what would you call it? The medieval view that C.S. Lewis talks about of the Earth being the center of the universe. It's not the pale blue dot. It is the center. And so I always say there's nothing up there. Yeah. But anyway, yes, by those vectors, is he a great man? Yes. But then when you look at Elon, you see, gosh, I don't even know if I want to talk about this now. Think about it. The current thing. It does kind of bore me having to talk about the current thing. But that was what this show was about, looking to get to the undercurrents of the current thing. But boy, is it boring to have to respond to things rather than actually talking about the depths of things, rather than talking about a subject that could actually help people. And so it is nice to be here on New Year's, though. But the point is, anyway, let's look at the chats, see what's going on there. Some people are saying stuff. Don't be Martian phobic. Wasn't the Enlightenment already a diversion from first principles? Yes. I mean, the beginning is, I suppose, when Heidegger talks about the first beginning, it's a Greek beginning. Personally, I'm not a fan of Musk's vision. And that's the thing. When you look at, that's someone saying in the chat, when you think about that, when you look at that, who's it for? Because a lot of it is, do you just want to feel like you're doing better? Do you want to feel like things are progressing and you're winning? Because, you know, people talked about winning. What's the nature of winning? I think a lot of people are quite happy to vicariously live through these elites, whether they are actually elite or not, and feel like they're winning. Or do you want to actually win, but have to do a bit of work at the same time? Because what we really need are leaders who can inspire us to look to the depths for a new spiritual beginning, not just the endless return of material conditions and improved material conditions. Yes, we do need that. Once those base materials are provided, though, we're still in the same nihilistic hell that we were before in the rich West. People are hurting. That's true. But we need a leader who's actually religious authentically, like an Orthodox Christian, or who can actually lay out a vision in that sense. Building sacred spaces, every city having a cathedral of the armed forces. Compulsory Sabbath. Compulsory prayer. Harness the state for compulsory prayer. But yeah, authentic religious leaders. And I mean, how do we get that in this modern age? Well, we have to do it. We have to do it. And so that vision that he's presenting is kind of a vicarious vision. You're living through him with his goal of going to Mars, which is actually provoked by pop sci-fi. His goals are all pop sci-fi. And when you look at him, he's actually a lot like you and me, or the regular gamer, in the sense that he's an elite in terms of he knows engineering, he knows computer coding, he has a lot of power, he's done great material things. His greatest service would be probably buying Twitter, really, freeing up so the gropers can use it, so the right wing can use it. That's probably his greatest service. But when you look at him in terms of his cultural understanding, it's pretty low. It's pretty, Diablo 2. It's not a classic arts education. It's not a looking to the depths of things. He's not spiritual. He doesn't have any of those qualities. I think he has a general decent understanding of history. I think he reads a lot of audio books on history these days, since he has entered a leadership position. So I think you would say that he's not a leader. He's an excellent marketer. Again, he's done a great service with buying Twitter, which he's now locking down on these issues. But that person, his inspiration that you're being tied up with the robots and the fake future, it's being pasted over what actually is the true potentiality for Americans, spiritual awakening, another beginning, because their first foundations were a spiritual, looking for the city, to create the city on the hill. That was kind of the idea. And they went out there. So I think that's kind of what people need to ask themselves. Do they want their leaders to help them aspire to do something more than just have better material conditions, which are important, but once you get that established, it's more important to find divine will. And like I said, people sense underneath that is the trouble of this whole thing, is that they're being treated like a statistic, and actually they know there is a soul and a potentiality for their people underneath it all, like I said at the start, which someone like Musk and someone like Trump can't account for. And so this New Year's Day, when we need to now think about resolutions and think about what the vision might be, is how do we get to a place where we're not provoked by pop sci-fi for our, and I called it in a tweet, a juvenile, the Mars mission is a juvenile, I think it's a juvenile thing, provoked by pop sci-fi, rather than by, yes, the rockets look impressive. It's very powerful. I do not deny the power of what's being unleashed, but I deny the truth of what's being unleashed, or the truth of what would be a more authentic way or vision to move towards. The radical subject first. That's Dugan's terminology, the radical subject. But what is that? It's nothing more than what I've talked about so many times before. Initiation. It's the radical birth at the ground of your being. And what does radical mean? When Dugan says radical subject, which is actually what we have to do to disclose a true future for Americans and for every individual, and what our leaders should promote and talk about. What is the radical subject that Dugan talks about? Radical is a key to it. Radical, what does that mean? Radical means rewritten at your roots. The rewritten at your roots underthrow. So the thing that then becomes, because subject means you're under the throw of, meaning rewritten at the roots of what throws here. So beneath the senses, beneath the naive worldview of the thought regime is rewritten, and is rewritten in initiation. And why don't we look at, this is what I'm more interested in looking at. I've never done a reaction video before, but I immediately sort of bailed out of that. But that's okay. Why don't we look at Dugan's statement about a radical subject, the radical subject, as a way of how would we disclose a actual vision, an actual possible spiritual golden age for Americans and even everyone involved in MAGA and the resistance. So what does Dugan say here? And I know what the radical subject is because I am one and I've done it, because it is nothing more than initiation, so I can tell you. But the radical subject is the realization of the outburst of the collective unconscious archetypes into the light of day along a model differing from that of the social and cultural logos which dominated in the cycle of known human civilization. What does that mean? The known logos is what we're talking about. It's the idea superstructure of human logos, of what it's become since the first beginning, since Greek times. It's evolved to where we are today. And so when he's talking about the collective unconscious, this is what's bubbling to the surface now. He says the realization. It's not realization in the casual sense. Realization here means realized, as in present. It's made present and begins to flood into what you see, which happens in initiation. But it's beneath the collective unconscious as well, because as we've talked about before, and again, you're seeing that with UFOs, with Tucker Carlson being scratched by demons, which is very legit and happened. You're seeing that. The collective unconscious, which is hell, because hell is the domain of will, is starting to bubble up, and you see it in the phenomena of UFOs. UFOs are a antediluvian monster, as Jung has talked about before, a physical manifestation in facticity from the unconscious. This is still working, right? Let me just make sure. I just saw a little camera icon disappear, so I'm sorry I had to interrupt that because we were just on a roll. Oh no, it's still working. See, I hate technology, man. I just hate technology. I'm biased against technology. Just distracts you when you're on a roll. So, the radical subject. That's flooding into. We know this is a real thing. It's flooding into our regular human logos that he's describing here when he says social, cultural logos, which is dominated in the cycle of known human civilization. This is an order, a diurnal order, that has been existing since, well, look, it comes from Greek metaphysics originally in the first beginning, which Christ fixes when he incarnates. But so this problem is very old. But the point is, it's human logos. It's our current known order of thought. Now, he goes on further here. The radical subject is the alternative logos, or more precisely, the logos in potentiality bearing a number of logoi. When he says logoi, what he's really referring here are the hierarchies, angels. They are sort of words that are in hierarchical order below the Trinity and below Mary. So that's what he means. He's a bit. The trouble with Dugan is he actually speaks in ways that are more mysterious than he should. I know that when Michael Milliman went on Oron's show to talk about the radical subject, it's actually very simple to explain what the radical subject is. But he said, oh, it's more of a mystery thing, that it's a knock 3 times to reveal what it is. Well, I'm going to tell you what it is today. Really, it's nothing more than initiation, which everything we've been talking about, rewritten at your roots. But it's about the Logos. So what does he mean when he's talking about the Logos in potentiality? Of course, it's Christ. In the eternal is the Logos in potentiality outside the human knowing that we are, which Elon Musk takes his ideas from, the stale, dead spirit of the times and the provokings of pop culture and sci-fi for shitty goals of material increase. As Jung said, we can go no further until we understand all that we are, because he saw how bad it was through the 2 world wars with that world mechanization of will to macht, of will to power, of the total state in those 2 world wars. And we're heading in the same direction unless we can have, instead of a golden age, which is really coal, and a return of material prosperity, which you need. I'm not denying that you do need a certain level of material prosperity. But if we don't ground ourselves in the true good and beautiful, in the way, truth, and life, and in the true rewriting at the roots that is deeply needed in our leadership and in with the people, that way's doomed. Eventually, the productivity is just going to... That's why they're desperate for immigration. Because they don't have a vision, because they're dying. They are dying. I even saw it. There's a video of Musk standing over the platform, which is paid for by mutual funds. You know, a lot of this money that comes to fund the whole thing comes from Americans and their retirement funds and that sort of thing. And he was sort of just hunched over this rocket thing, you know, almost like a digression. You know that there's that image of the evolution of man, and then it goes to man on a computer, and he's sort of hunched over more. It's a doubling down of a kind of Aramanic, satanic materialism. That's the golden age. But it will be propagandistically exciting to many people. And and this is definitely not a red pill, black pill. This is a white pill in the sense that it can be turned around, because it can begin with the ideas people. It can begin with the E-right. It can begin with the people that are watching this stream right now. It can begin with you becoming the radical subject. And Dugan's right about that when he talks about the Great Awakening, though I'm not sure he himself is an initiate, even though this is very well understanding what that is. But let's go on. The radical subject is an alternative logos, which shares with the hitherto known logos its diurnal nature. Diurnal means of the day, of the solar. Dugan takes a lot from Gilbert Durand, which is he's an incredible thinker of the collective unconscious. So he is worth reading. He's a very important book of his. Just look up Gilbert Durand. It's the only one that's translated into English that is highly recommended reading for people to see the unconscious forces that are motivating what's going on. So the dead setting of being that we're currently at is motivated by a solar order, but it's like a dead one, a dead Apollonian order, which is based on antithesis. All these ideas are not they're not like a new creative thing from outside, from chaos, from they are a antithesis from a thesis, which is like the hero slaying what is and to make something new. So created out of conflict. It's like a Heraclitan fire. And so that's why so many things are unoriginal. They seem like innovations, but they're actually created out of a kind of conflict, created out of a, rather than a true originality. You know, a rejigging of something that already is. A distinction, but antithetically, from a thesis that existed before, rather than a new beginning, which is what we're talking about here. So it's diurnal, it's solar nature, but it's potentiality, so it's hidden, so it's outside, but which belongs to collective, unconscious, and mythological foundations of society, culture, civilization, in a different fashion. And so he's hinting here in very subtle ways. Too subtle, I think, because he leans too much on a woolly uncertainty. You really need to know what this is and almost have to have experienced it to go, oh, that's what he's talking about. In a different fashion, meaning is the original grantor of this meaning and logos, the logos himself, who is always outside, human logos where we currently are and are knowing. He's the outside logos. That's why he says different fashion. Compared to this, the genesis of the former logos out of mythos was questionable in the very beginning, if not fatally wrong. Yes, compared to Jesus, compared to God, the genesis, think about this, and then the fall, right? The genesis of the former, which is out of Greek metaphysics, which becomes a rigid technical system, really, a dead propositional system that gets placed in the way of raw experience of logos and being. Again, what if you're not getting what I'm saying? Have a look at my video, Escape the Thought Regime. The way you see the world is pre-disclosed in advance by this idea superstructure. So this Elon Muskian first principles thinking doesn't even scratch the surface of this idea superstructure. So it's not getting to the first principles at all. This is really, really getting to the first principles here. So if you want you want a true goal and a true vision, this is the work you have to do. And so when he says fatally wrong, that's what Dugan's talking about. He's talking about the mistake in Greek metaphysics, which is to cut up being. It's to, like the mercenary story of the mercenaries cutting up Christ. In that cutting up of his clothes after the crucifixion. That's to do with this. It's to do with us cutting up and grasping and taking of reality, which kills it and places a dead propositional idea superstructure over it, which renders it as dead. And we don't actually get original, true, new ideas and vision. And the future is exchanged for a projection of the modern man onto the future, talking about rockets and going to Mars. When initiates quite realize that you can go to Mars in other ways. I'll just leave it at that. But from the philosophical point of view, the theory closest to this model is Heidegger's the event, the Energias. I don't know how to pronounce that, but it means the event, which he developed in 1936. The radical subject is capable of individuation under any circumstances insofar as it operates with logos, not as actuality, but logos as potentiality. In the sphere which lies between the collective unconscious and its concentration in the actuality of the logos. Before this concentration becomes irreversible. So how is this done? It's looking within, it's prayer, it's concentration without effort, as we've always talked about. So what the radical subject, as we've said already, the rewritten at his roots, has to do this process, concentration without effort, which is individuation, which I've said before. which is to dissolve yourself out of the thought regime interpretation of reality and to get to the ground of meaning, which is the Lord Jesus, at the ground of the psyche. That's alchemy as well. That's what alchemy is. But what differentiation Dugan doesn't make here is, and this is, I know this might seem like it's a bit not as relevant in terms of New Year's Eve, but this is what we have to become to have a true resolution. The resolution of New Year's Eve is not to have some chintzy, provoked resolution. It's to resolve the being that we are. That's our resolution. So the goals are granted by divine will instead of shitty billionaires and their crappy vision, which will grant nothing and no meaning to anyone underneath unless they're living vicariously through him. That's why it's relevant to today. I don't deny his achievements, by the way. And he did free Twitter, so God bless him. But we go on. Because if we don't have this spiritual vision, it doesn't matter. It's all for nothing anyway. It's all going to be China anyway. It's all going to be Antichrist anyway. Because that's what AI is. Now, when he says concentration becomes irreversible, he's talking about the flood, or as Rudolf Steiner describes it, the cosmic R word, R-A-P. That word, the cosmic R word of the mind, is what he's talking about here. Because this invasion from the collective unconscious, the collective unconscious is hell. It's where the archetypes are. But because hell is temporal, it's, if you want to see a distinction here, in facticity where we are, the regular, everyday world, beneath that, that's space, right? It's space and time. As you go towards the unconscious, which doesn't just apply to you, the subject, it applies to the whole world too, has its unconscious, then you go into pure temporality, which is the domain of the will, which is also called the psychological body in esotericism. That's where all these demons are and archetypes are. And so, but also good forces. But of course, further on and deeper down than that is the eternal, where the hierarchies and angels are, which is not temporal anymore. It's no longer the domain of will, because will only exists in temporality. When you leave into the eternal, you're outside that domain. And so the radical subject is doing it by looking within before it invades this space that's now under threat. The thought regime is under threat in a dark way, as we see with the Skittles people changing their type of Skittle, as I'm trying to say in code. The invasion of thought space, it seems like, oh, it's just ideology. It's ideology, people say. Oh, it's the LG whatever ideology that got these people. You're only seeing the dead propositional structure that you notice from within this quite protected human logos. Actually, the things behind the scenes that are pushing these what people call values, which contain both feeling and the will, which have been, when you consider an idea superstructure, you've stripped away the feeling and the will, which actually makes up true ideas, which are beneath the surface anyway and manipulate you, which are the first principles. The first principles are beings, not principles. And so this, and what Dugan's talking about here, before it becomes irreversible and this whole thing collapses, which is under threat of collapsing, Dugan's quite right. It will eventually, if this radical subject is not enacted by enough people. It will, at least in a collective way, or there will be or there will be, I don't know, Amish communities of people, Orthodox Christians and the like, that are protected. Who, or as our friend says, as our New Zealand tech friend says, Bitcoin monasteries with people who are radical subjects and initiates who protect Logos order from the potentiality in monasteries of Bitcoin, from the degeneration and the invasion from the collective unconscious. All those gods, the Greek gods like Cybele, are good descriptions of these forces that used to be seen kind of like you see now UFOs, that used to push their agenda but were felt directly. That will become more and more common as time goes on. As possession rises, as mental illness rises, as more people like Tucker Carlson get scratched by demons. So we need a deep understanding. And someone like Dugan has a good understanding of this. And Gilbert Durand and Jung. And of course the saints and the church fathers. And so you have to do it before that. You have to make your way into the collective unconscious through concentration without effort to reach the eternal, to reach the outside, to reach this Logos in potentiality who is completely uncorrupted and who we are to become. That's what this is talking about. And he, in the final analysis, you don't make yourself the radical subject. You do your side of it, but he does it. He does it. He rewrites you at your roots. You collaborate together. And as he goes on, this is the dissolved Logos, the proto-Logos. The radical subject is the realization of Selbst in its unconditional, free form, free of all circumstances, and the psyche does not participate in such realization since we are dealing with the numinous horizons of the spirit. And yeah, I just said that, is that you don't actually do it. You rejoin to him, as we've talked about in many videos here. But really, this just shows you what Dugan's talking about, what people don't understand what he's talking about. He's talking about initiation. He's talking about Christ, but he's talking about it in a philosophical way only, with Heideggerian terminology and with Jung involved, with Jung and Gilbert Durand, with the numinous horizons of the spirit in pure form beyond psychic waters, a kind of dry path. And that's quite right. It's the narrow way. You're protected on this way from the alien waters, are they called in the Bible? The alien waters, I think it's called in the Old Testament, which you want to stay away from. Because if you desire anything else but the truth, you will be corrupted by the psychic waters, which, what are psychic waters? They are the temporal. They are the collective unconscious. And so those alien waters you need to stay away from and to be on the, to be collaborating with him, not like the yogis do who take the risk of the broad way, or the people that take drugs take the risk of the broad way. When people take LSD, they're bursting open. An invasion from the collective unconscious in temporality occurs. So anyone who does those as I saw Sam Hyde actually even post about, do not touch these drugs. They rip open. They don't rip open straight to eternity and to God. They rip open the collective unconscious that we're talking about. They rip open hell, and some people have been lucky enough that Christ has found them in that state. But that's what they do. They rip open to temporality. They rip open to the collective unconscious. So, but that's going to happen more and more just naturally, this invasion, as the kind of low enlightenment sense-making, which is low, dissolves. But hopefully we'll be able to have enough of these Bitcoin monasteries, these radical subjects, these initiates and Orthodox Christians and Christians who go through this process, that it's this invasion has no effect on them. Of course, they're with the Lord. They have access to the primordial Logos. And sorry, I keep interrupting what we're talking about here, but that is essentially what the radical subject is, as defined it. So whenever it comes up, if anyone mentions it or Dugan mentions it, there's no great well, it is quite mysterious, but you should understand from what I just said there what it really is. You've got the human Logos on one side that is dying, that is getting closer to shutting. This human logos actually is what has space presence the way it does. It has all of its history, its idea superstructure that makes it what it is. It cuts off access to chaos. It cuts off access to outside, which is where primordial sense is, which is where the Lord Jesus is, who is the Word in potentiality. The Word in actuality is the dead derivative which came from original Greek metaphysics. And this is responsible for these shitty visions of materialist goals which have infected America, who was originally a very spiritual country, had very spiritual goals, and made them into a lusty, whore and fame worshipping, billionaire worshipping, rather than hero worshipping, rather than saint worshipping people. But that's not what they truly yearn for at the ground, as we just saw. There's something deeper. They know there's something deeper than just these material conditions, than just race, than just this and that. There's something else. Hyper agents. There's angel involved, like I've said before. There's soul, and they know that deep down. Even maybe the most cynical person is so wrapped up in a biologism. But I think even deep down, they still, what's really motivating it is this potentiality that they know there are, this possibility that they know they have that's been exploited and unfairly, horribly, for 100 years. I'm just sorry, I was just reading the chats. I'll go through them. I'll just keep reading for now. We'll just finish this Dugan. It's interesting. I should probably have us where this source is from. I think they're on the website of. If you look at I think it's the Fourth Political Theory website. I'll have to post a link later, but it's from the main Dugan website, where his articles on chaos and his articles on and how he's briefly talked about the radical subject. But let's read on further. This sort of just gives you an idea of what we've been talking about with Logos. I think here he's talking about our understanding of chaos and our understanding of what are human Logos. And when I say human Logos, I mean this derivative. I think that should be clear by now. I mean this derivative, dead, propositional superstructure, and the modern presencing of the world, scientism, those ideas. But let's just read this. The view from the position of the Logos, and if we want to look at the Logos from the point of view of chaos, again, human Logos, we're not talking about Christ here, we are told that this is impossible, seeing as we are used to examining chaos only from the point of view of the Logos, which tends to think it's got chaos mapped, it's got outside mapped by chaos theory, which is just merely another thought experiment, merely another inside method. Chaos is never mapped, just like the Lord is never mapped. You can't master Christ. He's always unknown and always outside. It's always beyond humanity to do so. It is thought that only the Logos is capable of seeing and that chaos is blind. No, this is not true. Chaos has 1,000 eyes. It is panopic. Chaos sees itself as that which contains the Logos, which means that the Logos is located within chaos and can always be within it. However, while containing the Logos within itself, chaos contains it in a totally different way than Logos contains itself, which it does by rejecting the fact that it is contained by anything, whatever the container may be, except itself, and accordingly placing chaos out of its view, equating it with nothing, rejecting it. Thus, the fish, recognizing itself as something different from the water surrounding it, can come to the conclusion that it no longer needs the water and jumps onto shore. However, one might try to throw the stupid fish back. It will try to jump time and time again. They called this insane fish Aristotle. The discovery of chaos does not equate to the excavation of history or of the structures that are presented to us as conquered by historical time. No, it is an encounter with the eternally young, which actually is the Christ child. Although I'm not sure. I think Dugan mixes up this stuff quite a bit because there are other definitions of chaos which are darker. But what's really going on is the outside is actually Christ, is actually the divine, is the potentiality we were talking about before. But he's unmasterable, like we said before. Chaos was not some time earlier or before. Chaos is here and now. This is the eternal. It's here and now. It's always contemporaneous around human logos. Chaos is not that which has passed as the logos propagandizes, as the human logos propagandizes in its false mastery of everything that is. We think everything's known and mapped, and it's not. And there is the other chaos of the collective unconscious is coming to invade that space, which we need to be prepared for. Chaos is that which is and that which will be. Sorry, and that, well, I think he means to say which will be. You and I, dear reader, are living in extraordinary times in which we are presented with an entirely unexpected opportunity to directly encounter chaos, which is outside, which is the logos in potentiality. This is not an experience for the weak-minded. After all, our task is the construction of a philosophy of chaos. Well, see, I don't really agree with him when he talks about the philosophy of the chaos. I kind of see that as I won't go more into that, but it is a kind of digression. Maybe it is designed to sort of mislead some Western people. What we're really trying to do is have an encounter with outside, an encounter with the eternal, beyond the collective unconscious, which really is the chaos he's talking about here, because the Lord is unmasterable. But I won't go further into that. But I just wanted to, really, that was mainly about the radical subject and understanding what that was. And that's what we really need to be doing this New Year's, to have a true vision for what America could be. Scott, according to Christianity, we are a soul incarnate. It's not anti-biology. No, yeah, I agree. There's nothing wrong with biology. We're here to save the world. We're not leaving it. No, I don't think you should reject biology. Just responding to a chat here. No, I'm talking about facticity. It's like, what we're talking about is the idea superstructure, not the body itself. That's kind of like David Icke stuff. We're talking about what's been created since the fall is a way you could think about it. It's a world. I don't mean world as in physical world. I mean like the world is co-relational and co-created. How we interpret the world also fills in what the world is. I don't mean that you're just going to go out to the eternal on its own. No. The kingdom of heaven comes to earth. So what we're talking about is the interpretation that needs to be dissolved, the enlightenment interpretation that we're talking about has to be dissolved. The scientism has to be dissolved to have a true vision. No, 100%, it's not Gnostic what I'm saying. But there are, when you look at Orthodox Christians, there are similarities talking about we're not of this world, but that, of course, you're not abandoning the body. The kingdom of heaven comes to earth through this process. You don't leave. So, no, not Gnostic, I'm not Gnostic at all. The interpretation is that there is virginal nature and then there is fallen nature. And what we want to unlock is the virginal nature and access to virginal nature, who is Mary. So that's what this process is about. It's not a evil prison. But the interpretation is the interpretation, the Luciferic satanic interpretation is a prison. They want to actually transform the possibility, because you sort of live in a halfway land when we're here. They want to get rid of the possibility of finding the Lord as a raw fact of experience, which is what Neuralink is going to be. That's the materialist vision. There's computers provoking you from every angle and 16 different monitors. There's, the Neuralink who will invade is the R word of the mind, and the R word of the place where you have access to the Lord. So yeah, there are forces that want to make it a prison. But no, the actual biology in the body itself, no. I agree with you with what you're saying about that. So, yeah. What else did we have to talk about? Let's look at some of the chats. Yeah, left hemisphere function reduced to a dead schematic blueprint. That's precisely what, if you look at Ian McGilchrist's work, that's both schizophrenia and autism are symptoms of a right brain retardation and a left brain, they're left brain phenomena. So when I think people tend to think that schizoids are all right brain or something. No, it's the other way around. They're exactly the same as autists. So you can see that with people like Elon. They're kind of stuck in that Spurg mind. They are in a kind of prison of the idea superstructure. So again, I'm just talking about the idea superstructure. I'm not talking about the body. Okay. Happy New Year, good sir. Very astute commentary and discussion. Well, it's been a bit scattered, but hopefully it was something I wanted to put together for New Year's to talk to you guys about. The true irony is that Elon, with his Doge plans, is actually an immigrant who will be taking a lot of US jobs away. Yeah, exactly. Very much doubt that Tucker was scratched by a demon, and if he was, he doesn't seem to have heeded the warning. Well, hang on, maybe he did. I mean, he seems to be looking towards his own approaching the Bible and understanding it, and because you really have to deeply understand it. I don't know. I tend to agree with him on his instinct of wanting to deeply, deeply read into it, rather than look at, especially with the Protestantism and their interpretations. I think that's what he was trying to avoid, the interpretations of the Bible, and actually just seeing, using, or really that's the process of deep biblical study, actually, is to reach behind the arcana that are behind the Bible. As Christian esotericism talks about the fifth gospel, which is behind the gospels. And is eternal. Jesus' acts were eternal. So when you actually deeply read into them, you kind of reach out to that as granted to you to understand the deep meaning of it. So I think he's actually engaging with it more, Tucker. And was he scratched by a demon? Well, let's look at that. That's an interesting question because we've been talking about the invasion, haven't we? The invasion of Logos. Human Logos, though, not divine Logos, which is Christ, who is a person. The invasion is amping up. We have to admit that, of course, these UFOs are, as I talked about at the start of the stream, they are a physical projection from the collective unconscious. They are, you could bounce radar off them for the brief time that they're there. That's known in the tradition. Demons used to be able to manifest physically a long, long time ago. That's why they call them antediluvian monsters, because they're of the time of the flood. When you go further and further back, the conditions that we understand the world to be in aren't the same as they are now. That's the thing you have to slowly get past, and reading people like Heidegger and reading deeper into these things, and even into the Christian tradition, is that when you're looking further back, don't think the world operates in the same way that it does now. So that's one point. Where are we going with that? Now, the demon scratching. Did it happen? I don't think he's so inauthentic that he'd lie about it. Now, was it Satan or Lucifer? No. They follow the rules. They tempt. They are really responsible for all the dark stuff that happens in temporality like that. They are the evil ones and always will be the evil ones. Lucifer and Satan. They're different. Lucifer is, you could consider, subjective temptation, and Satan is objective hypnotizing. So all the provokings that come from the world and the temptations that come from the world, you can think of Lucifer more like a subjective tempter. You're tempted by them both, but one comes from the object, the other comes from the subject. That's a way of thinking about it. And so they don't scratch people, but they tempt other people to create what are called egregores, which are, or they, you could consider that like a complex of the collective unconscious. Are actually, I mean, they're beings. They're made by the will and by arbitrary human will and low Faustian magic. And you go, what's magic? It's merely the will and the will's effect on the world. And we know from quantum mechanics, the will does have an effect on the world. The observation does affect the world. So what really happened? There are a lot of people with bad will towards Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson, being a very weak Christian, being a sort of Anglican, Episcopalian, barely having read the Bible, but accepting Christ merely as a group of beliefs, as I accept the propositions of Christianity loosely, but even just accepting them as a worldview is not enough. It has to be a contact in the domain where you're nested with him, in the eternal. It has to be, that's where faith is ignited by him. Obviously, the other stuff leads to it, but it's something that's granted. And so Tucker had no defenses against these things. But if we lead the Christian life, of course, they can't touch you. They can tempt you. The Lucifer and Satan can tempt you. But these other low demons, which these witches or Wiccans or the people were probably created that did, the worst they could do was do a scratch, if you think about that. It's not very impressive, but I think it happened. I think it's either an egregore created by human depravity in the collective unconscious, and because he has no connection with Christ and is weak in that domain, and he's a public figure, he drew a lot of attention to it and a lot of bad will, which ends up with being open to spiritual attack. So if you are leading a Christian life, if you are authentically leading a Christian life, if you have authentic faith, those sort of things can't touch you with Christ on your side. The only reason it happened to him is not, not confessing. He hasn't let go of all his resentments. He hasn't forgiven everyone in collaboration, in confession, in collaboration. He hasn't done all those things that release all the demonic parts of your nature and your sin. That's why it happened. But it definitely happened, I think, to Tucker. I have wanted to talk about that for a while, actually. And also the UFOs. So they're definitely real. They don't ultimately have essence, but they are the scratch. I think that's sort of a spiritual thing. I don't know. What did Pajot talk about? He's saying it's a miracle or a type of miracle. No, that miracles what's the best way of talking about it? It's magic is what it is. It's like a hyperstition in terms, and what is a hyperstition? It is a made by deep belief, deep will of a group of people that can affect the world. And so I think it was either a direct involvement of people that really hate Tucker Carlson, who, satanic types, low sorcerers. That could have happened. That's possible. Or it's something that's just of the collective unconscious. I don't think it was some physical apparition like the UFOs are, because that's a particular kind of thing. That's the UFOs are a way more dangerous sign, a bigger sign of the invasion of this human logos that we've been talking about, of the Enlightenment. It's the flood. They're more a sign of the flood than the demon scratching is. Demon scratching is they probably happens a lot. Yeah. But yeah, they're magic. It's low Faustian magic or a collective magic. Or something that is a entity of the collective unconscious and temporality outside space, outside human logos, but not eternal, of course. Yeah. It's hard to know exactly what it would be. I don't think it could be a group of humans doing something and operating sort of an arbitrary magic, or it could be some sort of an attraction because of his public figure status and lack of protection because of his lack of authentic Christianity. Yeah. I'll read some more of these chats. Happy New Year, everyone. Elon has proved that he's not one of us. Yes, he has. Rhodesian sensation. I have the opposite issue, left hemisphere damage, and I love science because it gives me insight that serves spiritual, doesn't undermine it at all. Maybe it is the left damage that doesn't allow the interpretation to get away with itself. Maybe that actually helps you rather than hurts you. I don't deny the power of medical science, and all these things are really good things. I don't deny all the power of science. What needs to happen is a meeting of the authentic logos and all the goods of the innovations that have occurred. That's really will eventually be the meeting of the kingdom of heaven and earth. The another beginning needs to happen with that. I don't think we should become Luddites. We need to find a way, which is initiation, to interact with these different devices, these different technologies, at the same time being deeply rooted in silence, deeply rooted in a daily Sabbath practice, and deeply rooted in divine will, so it can flow into that stuff. We need to be mediators of him into the low interpretation that everyone's stuck in of scientism. We need to be mediators of him into here. Saving. The greatest mission is to participate in his name, is to bring heaven to earth, which is through engaging with the technology to a degree, but being deeply rooted in the practices and the tradition to such a degree that you're kind of like a monastic in plain sight. And that will require some form of withdrawal, as I've talked about in previous streams, engaging with mysticism. More people need to do this. And more people need to become the radical subject, which is initiation, which is the actualization of Christ as a fact of your experience. So you don't any longer presence like a modern, so you can be led by divine will, so you have intuition, and you're not a provoked being by this rising tide from the collective unconscious, this rising tide of the flood that is coming. And I'm not the only one that's talked about this. You need to do this. But you also need to be in that world to be able to help other people. You can't just be like a yogi and check out, oh, I've done this. At least I'm saved. At least I've worked this out, because it is hard. It's hard and it takes time. You need to sacrifice 1/7 of your time to do it. It's 1/7 of your week is the Sabbath, and 1/7 of all your time to look within, to do the concentration without effort with prayer, as I've talked about so many times. You have to sacrifice that amount of your time, and that's tough. You're going to have to start orbiting, not around modernity, but orbiting around God. Your whole life is going to have to start revolving around him and not these online figures like Musk and false savior complexes, because it's not going to happen. There will be some good things that come about, for sure, I'm sure. And we can do a lot by going through this process and by showing a true vision, a spiritual vision that can happen at the same time. The best thing to do is to convert him, if possible, to pray to convert him. As even Yavin's talked about, converting elites is very important. So I'm not saying completely abandon him, but converting them to what needs to become, or at least people around them. That's what people used to do. That's why you saw all these classical books that have dedications to my prince, such and such of Wales, the old books, because they were the patrons. That's how you influence the levers of power in that way. But truly, the vision is going to have to come from us and the people that engage with and go through this process of the radical subject of initiation on this New Year's Day. And so I've actually kind of enjoyed talking about this. I haven't gone into the video. It doesn't say much from my going into reactions. Reaction videos, but this has been more interesting for me. I don't know. I'll have to try that on another occasion. I just started watching that video of Sam, and I can't do it. I can't do this reaction video thing. I'll try it again at some other time. But many names, Zoltan von Bose, many names, all he belief systems talk about those three. All the leaders of the world failing at everything, the UFOs, it's all part of it. It's getting very conspiracy. The thing about conspiracy is people tend to, I think this is the problem with, what's that chap's name? David Icke. I listened to an interview with him. I'm not that familiar with him, but when he started talking, I thought, here's your problem. Obviously it's very Gnostic, but also he's attributing a conspiracy as if it's everyone in the know, when it's, as Yavin, it's quite well understands, as Land understands, the system is distributed and reinforces itself. So it's not a one person. It's actually, as we know, egregores. It's things from the collective unconscious that motivate these things. It's not a group, the Bilderberg group, that do everything. It's like a general flood rising. It's a general, the nodes aren't top down from one node. They're a distributed system, which everyone is pretty familiar with. Happy New Year, Scott. Chris M. Happy New Year, Chris. I would think demons had much more to gain from tempting Tucker further down the path he's already on than scratching him and scaring him straight. That's right. And so either it's someone, I think it happened. I don't know. These things are very complex. I definitely think it happened, though. Who knows? Again, it could be perhaps someone wanted more out of it than they got. In terms of Faustian magic, in terms of that magic of the will, that sort of low sorcerers. And these people exist. There are Wiccans that try cast spells and do these things. Like, sorcery is a real thing, and that's what I was so shocked to discover. I always thought these things were nonsense. When you'd read about theosophy and that sort of thing. But no, that stuff's legitimate. Again, when you sort of discover this stuff when you read to the ground of physics. I was very into science when I was young and in school. I loved physics, big fan of that worldview, and read to the depths of it only to discover that, oh, wait a minute, you guys are as undecided about all this. Here are the paradoxes of quantum mechanics, where observation seems to affect whether something is a particle or a wave, and all the different paradoxes that are related to that. Quantum mechanics and the particle physics. And your interpretations are incredibly vast, and the most absurd ones are the ones related to modernity. And then you start delving in deeper and realizing, and you think, of course, Rudolf Steiner with his incredible, prolific, and they don't put 60 years of their life into something, or 50 years of their life into something without it being legitimate. You don't sacrifice that much unless there's something legitimate about it. But on the outside, of course, you listen to Wikipedia articles when you're young or whatever you read foolishly. And you, of course, ignore the tradition and what The church fathers have said about this stuff since the dawn of everything. And as I've said many times, as the further and further we go on, the more true this stuff becomes. The traditional world picture turns out to be truer, more reliable for predicting the complex phenomena that seem to be emerging than the Spurg mind, than scientism, in terms of complex phenomena anyway, in terms of how the memes work, in terms of hyperagents. The tradition is much more all-encompassing and predictive of the stuff that's been happening. So you're going to see that more and more people turning to it and saying, of course. And then you just realize how wrong you were. But also you realize, I crucified Christ all this time. And that's true of what we need to consider. Though people go, the Jays did it. We all did it. And we all do it in our lives because Christ's eternal and we're constantly crucifying him and hopefully come to see the light eventually, that he is the Logos. But we all did that to him and do that to him until unless we're born into belief. But, a lot of people in modernity, we all crucified him. We're all responsible. Humanity was responsible for that crucifixion. But of course, the Jays rejected him. And that needs to be remembered. So, have you heard of Chris Langan? I've heard that name before. Father and Son is just a metaphor for him creating himself into creation. I don't know what you're talking about there. Chris Langan, I've heard the name before, but I'm not sure what that is referring to. Yeah. Anyway, did anyone else want to say anything? I don't want to just leave too early. I guess we could watch some videos, but what time is it? Anyway, I mean, I've come on and said some decent things about the new year, I think, and said Happy New Year. But I guess I'll just check the apps and make sure that no one said anything. But I guess we could watch some of the videos that I've been talking about if you want to sit here with me and watch these videos and react to them. But yeah, let's just have a look and see if anyone else has said anything. Let's put screen cap on. All right. There, yeah, this is downtime and I'm sure boring. If you want to sit here with me and watch these videos. Oh, yeah, I mean, it looks like pretty much and everyone else are just part of the story, so it's real for himself and the bonus of him being nice. Yeah. Okay, everyone. Well, look, thanks for tuning in. And I hope you've had a great New Year's. I hope that is a bit of inspiration there for your new year, that we can have an alternate vision, that it doesn't have to be just about material conditions, that there is something deeper that we can look to, and that to actually even have a resolution, a New Year's resolution, as I said earlier, you have to be resolved at the roots, become the radical subject, to become an initiate, to join, to become an authentic Christian and recognize the ground of your being and find him at the ground of the psyche, Lord Jesus, to actually really have a future vision for America, to find the essence of what an American even is and to unlock his actual potentiality, and even all the West. The West's actual potentiality has to go through this process. And it's on the New Year's Day of any day, it's the most important time to remind people to look within, to begin the practices, as I have said many times in the streams. Then, instead of coming up with some provoked idea, some provoked vision from what already has occurred, you can be granted the grace of intuition and the grace of divine will and understanding what you are to do from outside temporality, not as a product of these things that are now starting to emerge from the collective unconscious, or even just the regular everydayness, forgetting about the darker things that motivate people, as we see with the Skittles people and the progressive agenda. There are darker things motivating them, but the point is we need something outside of it if we're going to survive as the West as a whole. So our New Year's resolution, all of us, should be a re-solution of who we are at the ground of our psyche going through this process. Only then can we pick out a particular to move towards. Yes, improve material conditions, but let's create and let's find the true spiritual leaders of the future who are guided by something greater than modernistic science fiction. And that's what all I'll say. Happy New Year, everyone. And God bless you.